So first up this morning is Lisa Murphy. Lisa's going to be talking about mining your metrics to drive traffic and engagement. Lisa's a digital strategy consultant who's worked for leading Canadian publishers on websites, apps, social media, and video for brands such as Chatelaine, House & Home, Maclean's, and more. So welcome, Lisa.
So I thought I'm going to be talking about metrics today, and I'm sort of just going to whip through the presentation, and then I really hope you've got questions at the end, and we can leave time at the end to address those, because I'm always happy to share some thoughts and that sort of thing. I thought I would start with this famous wave painting, just because I think when we think about data and metrics, we actually have so much data now, like between Google Analytics and social, and whether you've got Chartbeat or not. There's just so much data that we kind of have to sift through, and sometimes it can feel very overwhelming, and it's hard to know what exactly should I be honing in on. So I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, in fact, that data is not going to feel like a crashing wave, but just like a calm ocean that you can gather lots of insights from. So I should mention, I have worked for many different Canadian publications, some very small publications, very large, so everything from Rogers to small design magazines, and I've worked on sort of web and apps and that sort of thing. But I am not a research person. I am not a data scientist. I have an English major and a journalism degree. So in fact, numbers don't come naturally to me, but I've actually learned, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, how critically important looking at the data can be. And so for me, the questions that looking at the data is helping me understand is, how do I grow my audience? How do I maximize social? What are the competitive set doing? What can I learn from them in terms of benchmarking my performance against theirs? And when I say I mean the magazines that I work for. How do we boost revenue? By understanding what really works and therefore what really sells. And what's driving engagement, what's not working, which is as important as what is working online. So we can stop doing stuff that is expensive and inefficient and really focus on stuff that really works. And how can I make my team care? A lot of times we work in a very small team. We're under very serious pressure. We've got production deadlines. It's really hard sometimes to kind of make the entire team feel like they understand what's going on in digital. But once we start sharing the metrics on a regular basis, it comes to life for the whole team and really makes it more achievable. So I really do feel that becoming data-driven is key to growing, both your social, online, tablet, etc. You just have to be looking at the numbers. So in terms of analytics, these are some very big publications, but I just wanted to kind of point out that in fact, you may be reading a lot about larger publications that have audience engagement editors and social editors. So there are a lot of publications now that are really trying to focus heavily on their analytics and what that's telling them. Their social analytics as well as their web and downloads and all those numbers. And once they do start looking at the numbers, they actually start working it into their editorial workflow. So for example, the New York Times, you probably read that innovation report a year ago that was leaked that was really so interesting. Take a look at it if you haven't looked at it. But they've really started to focus looking at their numbers. They now include their analytics when they're in assignment meetings and decide, should we do that story? Actually, no, it didn't perform that well online. Let's do something else instead. Fortune magazine has also been really focusing on their analytics, and they've really grown. And I think for all of us too, the reality is print still drives the majority of our magazine revenue. And so the bottom line for many of our publishers is sort of like, okay, but how does all this online stuff actually drive growth for the print magazine as well. And the beauty is that when you do grow your digital footprint, you do grow the brand identity, and you are able to potentially sell more print issues on newsstand as well. And that's been the case for a lot of publications. Here in Canada, there are a lot of organizations that are really starting to hone in on the data. And I highly recommend, there's a site called NewsWhip that shares a lot of really great social analytic data. And they're sharing a lot of strategy from various Canadians who are doing really well on social, for example. So Global News and Huffington Post Canada, they both have like sort of social media editors, they've got engagement editors. So they're really focusing on the numbers, but that makes it sound like you have to have this dedicated person. In actual fact, even if you had kind of 1/10 of a person in your office looking at the analytics once a month and sharing it, that can make a huge difference. And I've definitely seen lots of growth with some of the magazines that I've worked on. So what does data-driven growth involve? It starts with gathering analytics, and we're going to be talking about a lot of different metrics, but in fact, I'm able to gather the metrics that we're going to talk about in an hour and a half, sort of either once a week or once a month. And at the end of this session, I know we're going to be sharing all of these PowerPoints. Mine has hyperlinks in it to some helpful documents, and I'm also going to share some sample Excel charts of how to gather your analytics into a chart month over month, year over year, et cetera, and also all of your social analytics. So that can help you kind of get started in terms of tracking. So gathering your analytics and then benchmarking, and I'm going to talk about how to do that because it's critically important that we understand how do we rank, what's normal, how, are we doing well or do we need to improve? And then sharing. So as I said, it's so important that the entire team sees the data, and I strongly recommend, I've worked with so many different publishers, and I can tell you that even the biggest publishers, they've got so much data, but it's really hard to bring the whole team together to actually look at it. And when I say the whole team, I don't just mean the editorial team, because I do mean like all of the print editors, but also the sales team, the marketing team. Everybody needs to see these numbers to understand how you're doing well. Because, for example, if the sales team sees something that's performing really well on a particular topic, month after month, they can see recipes are driving so much growth for us. So I'm going to focus on those food advertisers, and I can focus on maybe selling them sponsorship of a holiday recipe guide. So it gives everybody in the building an understanding of what's doing well and also what's not doing well. And then, of course, once you've got the data, you can start to adapt to that and start making decisions that are actually going to grow your traffic. And that's good. So some of the things we're going to talk about are website analytics, social analytics, tablet and app, and e-newsletters. And ideally, you're going to be tracking these things month over month, as well as year over year, and sharing it. I'm just going to keep saying share, keep sharing, keep sharing. So the basics. I'm sure all of you are already looking at this data on a regular basis. So whether you're using, who all is using Google Analytics? Okay, cool. Who's using Omniture? Anybody using Omniture? Anybody using ComScore? Okay, great. So Google Analytics it is. So you may be looking in Google Analytics just on your computer and kind of checking it out on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis. But ideally, if you sort of start to actually pull those reports and then start plunking them into an Excel chart so you can see how they are growing month over month, year after year, that's helpful. So things you're going to be looking at that I'm sure you're already looking at is your unique visitors or users. Is that figure growing? What percentage of those are new versus returning? If you have lots of returning visitors, clearly you're doing good things. If you're not, then there's possibly opportunities to improve. Page views, are they growing year over year? Month over month can be tricky because it may be that your publication has a really amazing budget guide that always coincides with the federal budget. And then that month, your page views go bananas. But then, of course, the next month, it goes back to normal. It's not a bad month. It just doesn't look as good month over month. But obviously, you want to take a look at month over month and also the whole year so you get that big picture. Pages per session, is that growing month over month and year over year? Ideally, it is, even incrementally. Time spent, so what's the duration of the average session? Is that growing or shrinking? But keeping in mind that now that we're all using smartphones, realistically, you may see your mobile time spent actually going down a little bit. And that's not so bad because literally when people are using a smartphone, they tend to spend less time. They're quickly looking for information. So you may notice that your time spent can be a bit low on certain platforms. But what you want to see is just that it is steady and not dropping. With your bounce rate, obviously lower is better. So bouncing when people arrive at your site and they immediately leave because it's not what they were looking for. So in terms of the bounce rate, it can be, if it's very high, like let's say it's 80%, that could indicate that there's some challenges with your site design. Maybe everything is super text heavy and it's sort of like you kind of get there and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to wade through a lot. So it can give you a sense of, okay, maybe we need to look at our design or the content. And when you're looking at the bounce rate, you can look at the bounce rate not just for the site overall, but also for individual pages. Because you may discover that there are certain pages that are actually your top performing content, but there's a hugely high bounce rate. And you find out it's because maybe there's a keyword in the title that people are finding this page via search, and it's not actually kind of what they wanted. It's not delivering on that. So you can take a look at some of those pages that have a high bounce rate and potentially fix those and get some insights there. So as I mentioned, it's very important to try to benchmark where you're at compared to your competitive set. And ideally, you've actually, as a team, decided who are our competitors. So maybe there's 5 Canadian publications whom you consider to be competitors. And then ideally, you've also established a group of publications that you feel are not competitors, but are very similar to you, whether they're in the States or whether they're here in Canada. And so by looking at that group, the metrics of the group that are similar to you, you can start to get a sense of goals. Because let's say you're a small design magazine and you're not going to compare yourself to House and Home because you're a very small niche design magazine. So you might want to compare yourself to a small niche US magazine. And if on their media kit it says that they've got 200,000 page views per month, you can sort of say, okay, well, they're in the States, they've got a much larger potential audience. Let's divide that by 10 and am I getting at least 20,000 page views? So you can sort of start to measure yourself compared to the competitive set. ComScore does give you access to competitive numbers of different magazines. The challenge with ComScore is that you have to pay to be part of it. And it's quite expensive. So if you can find somebody with ComScore access who can show you numbers, that's great. But just keep in mind, another way, of course, is just to look at the online media kits of competitors or similar magazines. Take a look at their numbers. But just keep in mind, if it says that their numbers are ComScore or Omniture, those numbers are very different from Google Analytics. Typically Google Analytics numbers are higher. So it's not comparing apples to oranges, but at least you have a sense, or apples to apples, but at least you have some sense of what their traffic is, and you can kind of compare yourself to that. Luckily, in Google Analytics, there are benchmark information for page views per visit or session, average time spent, and bounce rate. And you just go into Google Analytics, choose audience and benchmarking, and it tells you the 2015 arts and entertainment average bounce rate, for example, is 57%. And you can change that benchmark. Let's say you're an oil and gas publication. You could actually change the benchmark to the oil and gas industry and get that benchmark number. So it's all available in analytics to you. And you can sort of compare yourself. In terms of average time spent, it's about 6 minutes on average for US media and entertainment sites. For news sites like the Globe and Mail or the Calgary Herald, it's about 3 minutes. I see some Canadian publications as low as 1 minute, others, as high as 7 minutes. So take a look at your own numbers and get a sense from there. You've probably heard that The Economist and the Financial Times and some other publications are trying to actually sell ads based on time spent on their websites. We're not there yet, and I still think that unique visitors and page views are incredibly important because, The Economist is a completely different beast from most of us. So in terms of looking at your content, so you want to take a look at your top content for each month, the top 25 pieces of content, for example, and then you want to take a look at year to date, what's your most popular content. So you're looking at content page views, average time spent on page, the bounce rate for each, whether people are coming in on that page or exiting your site on that page. And by looking at that top content, you're going to start to see some trends. So it may be that 1 month your top 10 rhinoceroses article performs extremely well. I doubt it, but rhinoceroses, whatever. So it may be that one story does really well 1 month, and the story that does least well, in fact, was never promoted on social. It was never included in the e-newsletter. So when you look at the top content, you do have to have that context in mind that some pieces may have been promoted more than others, and that caused them to have very high numbers. But even with those month-to-month anomalies, you still start to see trends, and you start to see that, every time we do any type of surfing content, it just completely tanks. Like, nobody is interested in surfing content. But whenever we do our mountain biking content, that performs really well. We get a lot of social shares on it. It's performing really well. And so you start to see month over month that certain types of content do really much better than other types. And then when you start to see that, you can start to make editorial decisions. So when you're in your assignment meeting or when you're in that planning meeting for the upcoming issue, and you're thinking about, okay, we're going to interview this person, and somebody's like, hey, let's get a video, let's do that story about surfing, and we're going to spend $500 on a video of the top surfer, and you're like, no, we're not going to spend $500 on a video of a surfer, or because we just know that surfing content never performs well for us. So it's not like you can't experiment. You're going to continue to experiment and see the numbers, but you can start to see trends over time about what your audience is really enjoying. And you can look at different types of content. If you see that galleries consistently do better than articles, how do you package news then as galleries? A lot of sites, want to do newsy content, and so they'll do like one article of, something news from today, another article, news from today. What if you did a gallery of daily news hits? And so you have sort of a gallery of health news, for example, and it's sort of linking to the original source, each gallery slide, for example. So there are different ways, which is not to say, of course, you're still going to do in-depth articles, don't get me wrong. But if you start to think about which types of content perform well, then you can think about how you can present content in a way that drives the most page views and engagement. You can see if mountain biking is always very popular with your audience, then that's what you should invest your video dollars in. So you can start to see, whatever your top articles are, those could potentially be videos. They could be done as galleries. They're just, you can start to extrapolate that. You also want to see whether people are bouncing off certain pages, in which case you might want to optimize those pages. And you want to look at what is not performing. So just stop doing the stuff that is not performing. I know even really big magazines, they would be consistently, month over month, doing those behind the scenes videos, at the fashion shoot where the models get their hair blown out. And we're looking at the data and it's like, nobody watches these videos. Nobody. You've got 100 views in a year. Stop doing the behind the scenes videos. It's just not working for you. But your how-to videos are performing really well. So do more of those. But you'd be amazed at how many publications continue to do things like they've always done because they're just not even looking at the numbers. And this applies to tablets as well, because we're all, trying to do really beautiful interactive tablet editions and have lots of multimedia extras, which is amazing. But we do need to make sure that people are actually looking at them in those tablet editions. And sometimes when you look at the data, you realize, actually, I know one magazine that used to have a lot of audio files, and it would be the editor sort of reciting her editor's letter. And then you kind of look at the numbers and it's like, yeah, you know how you spent an hour doing that? 10 people looked at it. So let's just stop doing that and focus on, the print issue and doing more fun multimedia stuff on the website that's going to reach a larger number of people. I'm not saying don't do interactive tablet editions. I'm not saying that. But what you do should be based on the stuff that performs the best. And in terms of if the sales team understands which content performs best, then that helps them sell more effectively because they can go to advertisers and say, we know these types of content perform really well for us. If you're doing sponsored content, that's the type of content you should be doing. Same goes for the top topics. So I want to look every month at what are the top pages on my site, what are the top sections, what are the top subsections, what are the most popular tags, if I have tags, and what are some of the site search keywords. So if I have that information, it really helps me understand where I should be putting my online dollars toward. And so if 60% of my traffic is actually on the recipes, and somebody sort of says, well, let's, blow out our mountain biking section and go crazy on it. It's like, no, I think I can give you this much budget for the mountain biking, but I really need to allocate the majority of my online money to recipe development so that helps you make those decisions. And it can also help you understand if you have certain articles that are always popular on a particular topic, you could consider making an online guide or a sort of meta page that really goes deep on that popular topic. Because the reality is, for a lot of us, we have very small sites. Some of your sites may not even have tags or a related content function that's showing articles. Like, if you like this story, you'll love these ones. So when you don't have tags and when you don't have the related content auto suggestions, you kind of almost have to create these kind of meta pages in order to make sure that people see lots of content. And when they see lots of their favorite type of content on a single page, that's going to drive up your page views per session. Videometrix, as I just said with that example, it's so important to keep an eye on how your videos are performing, because the beauty of videos today, obviously, is you can do them cheaper than ever before. You can do them with iPhone, you can do it with Periscope, you can do a Google Hangout as a video. The options are endless. And I've got some additional slides at the end that you'll see. I won't go through them right now, but it's just sort of some thoughts about different stuff you can do that's fun and cool. But with video, whether you're doing it cheaply or expensively, you want to make sure you're doing stuff that actually works. And of course, also a lot of us small magazines, we might do like one-off videos, like, okay, I'm just going to do an interview of this guy who's featured in our cover story. And that's great that you're doing that video, but oftentimes just doing one video is very expensive. So you might be better off doing a little series of short videos to really maximize your budget. And chances are, because you're going to do a series based on what's most popular, you're going to get more page views off of that. So what you're looking at is you want to measure your video starts, midpoint, your video completes, your average view rate, your average view time, which videos performed best on desktop, mobile, tablet. You want to research your benchmarks, figure out what's the average, and there's hyperlinks in this that can take you to some benchmarks information. And looking at those metrics can help you understand where you should allocate your video budget in future. You can also take a look at YouTube as well as a guide. Okay, what performs well typically on video in my niche topic? And also, by having these video metrics, you can also have the data to actually go to advertisers and say, our how-to videos perform really well. And what we're suggesting to you is we're going to actually do a series of sponsored how-to videos using discrete product shots of yours in the background, or not so discrete, but at least you know which types of videos do best for you, and the sales team does too. So you want to understand which device types are accessing your content. So are people coming to your site on mobile? Are they coming on a tablet? Are they coming on desktop? For many kind of like a niche type business site, they might still have 80% of their traffic on desktop. And that's okay because that's their audience. But increasingly, obviously, we all have smartphones and mobile is where it's at. I know as of January this year, much more than the majority of news sites had more mobile visitors than desktop. And I know that many of the top Canadian magazines are now inching towards 60% mobile. So you really want to be taking a look at your site on your smartphone and getting a sense of how does it look? Is it working well? And by looking at that percentage, you can start to understand too where things should be on your site. So by looking at the device screen resolution, you can get a sense of what people are using most often, and then potentially design your pages with that in mind. So if most people are looking at the site on mobile, then that might change where you put your e-newsletter sign up, for example, which is so important to have your e-newsletter sign up everywhere. But it may be that actually you want to have it not just at the top, but also at the middle of the page, which can often be that above the fold, just above the fold and just below the fold is often a real hot spot. So by understanding what device people are on, you can understand where to put it on the home page and all of your pages, because we know that in fact, many people are coming to your site not to the home page, but they're going in on a page level via search or social. And so if you do have budget to relaunch in the coming months or years, absolutely you have to go mobile responsive. You need to make sure that you're there for people. And so when you're designing, you want to design with a mobile first approach. So always designing what it's going to look like on the phone first, and then what it's going to look like on all the other platforms, because that's really where we're going. Of course, with the rise of the phablet, not all screens are that small, so that's part of it as well. This is actually a slight diversion, but I just came across this data and I thought it was quite interesting. This is not necessarily the percentage of mobile traffic to a website, but it's the growth of mobile as part of the overall audience mix for some magazines. And you can see that in the US, the mobile web is growing quite a bit. And so now, for example, half of ESPN's audience is coming from mobile, and on People, about a third of their audience is coming from mobile. And that's not just their web traffic, that's their entire audience, their entire readership. So all of those metrics that we just talked about, I typically, as I say, pull in about an hour and a half once a week or once a month. So it's not onerous, but all of the information that you garner from it can help you understand whether your design and whether your content is really performing. And so, for example, if you see that you've got low page views per session, you might want to ask yourself, is your content within your site findable and accessible? Maybe you need tags if you don't have them already. Maybe you need that related content suggestion. Maybe you need some guides that include multiple pieces of content. You also want to take a look at the time of day. What time of day are people looking at your site? What day of the week are they looking? Are they looking on the weekends as compared to the weekdays? And it's different for every publication. If you have a business publication, your highest time might be 7 in the morning. And I'm not suggesting that everybody should start work at 4 in the morning so that content is ready for them. But actually, it might make sense to have one staffer who does start early in the morning, or the person who handles social maybe works from noon until 8, because actually your best social time is late at night. So sometimes you can kind of adjust that, but more realistically, you can just schedule content to go live automatically at the time when people are most likely to be looking at your site. And ideally, you want to be, let's say, again, because we have small staffs, let's say you've got 5 new pieces of content for the week. Ideally, you're not putting up all 5 pieces of content on the same day. Ideally, you would be spreading it out over the 7 days, including the weekend, so that not only are you training your audience to know that they can come back and get fresh content, but you're also training the search engine to re-index your site every time you put up a new piece of content. So you want to spread it out if you can. And you also want to look at your competitors' timings. So if your closest competitor is House and Home, when are they putting up new content? What time does their e-newsletter go out? Does it go out at noon, 8 p.m., 7 in the morning? That can give you some insights into potentially when your audience might like those too. And then you can test it and see whether it works for you. So in terms of kind of the overall mix of how are people getting to your website, and don't forget you'll be getting this, so it'll be in your inboxes later, or you can access it anyway. So how are people getting to your site? Are they coming via search? Are they coming via social? Are they coming directly to you? So that's a combination of them typing in your web address, or they're coming via e-newsletter, or they're coming via a link that somebody emailed to them or texted to them. So all of that can be direct traffic. And then are they coming from referral traffic? So maybe Snowboards or Us has a link to your site and it's actually driving traffic back to your site. And it's amazing how actually you can have a link, an inbound link from a site that actually they put it up 5 years ago and it's still driving traffic to your site, and you're like, yes. So those inbound links are very helpful. So you want to be looking at where your traffic is coming from month over month, year over year, and you want to be looking at these things. Now, these numbers here, 38, 10 to 25, 22, 15, this is a very unscientific representation of what I have seen working with Canadian magazine websites over the last years. So, but also comparing it to kind of some industry averages. So, for example, in 2014, the publisher average of search traffic, the percentage of it, was about 41%. I'm seeing a lot of Canadian magazines at about 35 to 38% coming from their traffic coming from search. And I've got paid here. For many of us, there is no paid search budget. There's very little promotional budget, even for the biggest magazines. So it's usually organic search. And that tells you whether your content is search engine optimized or not. Social. So social is obviously exploding, on fire, driving so much traffic today. And so in terms of Canadian magazines, I've seen everything from 5% of traffic coming from social to 40% of traffic coming from social. But what's interesting is there was a study of 300,000 sites that found that the average was 32% coming from social. So that can give you a sense, if 7% of your traffic is coming from social, it does give you an idea, like there's an opportunity here that we could boost our numbers much more substantially. And in general, social is driving way more traffic than search for some of the digital native sites. So believe it or not, BuzzFeed now is only getting about 2% of their overall traffic from search, and 75% of their traffic is coming from social. So to me, I find that super exciting because it really does show that if you do invest some time on understanding your social analytics, you can really grow your traffic exponentially. And for direct, it's 22%, and referrals, sort of about 15% is about average. So when you're looking at your social media strategy, ideally, and this will be part of what I said to Suzanne as well, you're actually going to do an Excel chart where you're actually looking at your social numbers compared to your competitive set. So how many Facebook likes do you have compared to your competitive set? And how is that growing over time, week over week, month over month? Because when you can see, when you're benchmarking against your competitors and similar publications to yourself, then you can begin to say, okay, you know what? If that magazine can have 50,000 followers, that's possible for us too, because we're very similar. But you also want to sort of benchmark your proportion of effort to what gives the most bang for the buck. And the thing is, for many of us as sort of journalistic media types, we really love Twitter. Like, Twitter is so amazing. I love Twitter. But the reality is, Facebook is driving the majority of traffic to the majority of not just media sites, but all sites. People say Facebook is over, millennials don't like Facebook. That is like just patently untrue. Facebook is driving tons of traffic. It's driving so much traffic for BuzzFeed, for Vox, for QZ.com. So you cannot afford to ignore Facebook. And so you should be looking at, when you start looking at your referrals and seeing that the majority of your referrals are coming from Facebook, you need to start thinking about, okay, if I only have 15 minutes to do social media today, I'm going to spend 10 minutes on Facebook, 2 minutes on Pinterest, 2 minutes on Twitter, and 1% on LinkedIn, or 1 minute on LinkedIn. I'm not going to spend 10 minutes on Twitter because it's not giving me the traffic that I need. So this is, again, very unscientific, but just sort of a bit of a sense of how other sites are getting traffic. And you may be surprised to see how high Pinterest is. There's a lot of data that shows that Facebook and Pinterest are some of the only social platforms that are growing referral traffic. But I've got Instagram and Snapchat at 0. And the reason why is because right now, those platforms really aren't driving any traffic because there's only links in the profile. But it is driving brand awareness and discovery in a massive way. And as soon as Instagram does add links, and they're saying they will, once they do, it's going to become a traffic fire hose for the publishers that have spent time building their Instagram numbers. A lot of people think, oh, it's very visual, it's not for me. But remember, you can do quotes, you can regram other people. There's a lot of opportunities on Instagram. So Twitter, as you can see, maybe 10% of traffic. LinkedIn, I've put, even though it's only 1%, I've put up high because LinkedIn, people don't think they can get traffic from LinkedIn, but you can actually. And some sites get quite a bit of LinkedIn traffic, especially if they start a LinkedIn group or if they're participating in a LinkedIn group. So you want to look at where your social referrals are coming from, whether they're growing over time, and then allocate your efforts accordingly. I'm not going to go through this thank the Lord, don't worry. But what I've done is I've given you information about the metrics to look at for each social channel. And I can tell you that when you start to analyze your Facebook data and when you start to analyze your social data, it really gives you the information you need to grow. And one example, a small sort of French news site I worked with, they actually grew their Facebook followers from 30,000 to 120,000 in a year. And the way they did that was just by looking at their Facebook posts, seeing what time of day they had the most people on their Facebook, seeing their Facebook posts, and then just posting at that time of day. And what they actually did was sometimes they would post, if they knew that noon was their high point, they would actually put something online at 11, let it get a little bit of likes and shares, and then by noon it was really starting to climb and was showing up more likely in people's news feeds. So by taking a look at those analytics, you can start to learn, and it's extremely helpful. This looks like very daunting. In fact, I pull this information together, all of the information I'm going to show you, in about 2 hours a week or 2 hours a month. Even if you can't do it once a month, do it once every 3 months. But share this social data with your whole team as well, because once they understand what performs well on social, they'll know that they can start to do more content that's going to perform well on social. Because if you get one story that performs really well on social, that could drive page views dramatically. One tool I've mentioned on one of the previous slides, I am like addicted to, in love with buzzsumo.com and sumorank.com. So what you can do is you can type your web address into buzzsumo.com and it'll tell you over the last year, 6 months, 24 hours, what content from your site has been shared most by the world. So this isn't people that have necessarily shared one of your Facebook posts. This is actually people all over the world having gone to your site, finding a piece of content. Maybe they found it through your e-newsletter. They shared it through Facebook. And funnily enough, when you start to see what other people are sharing from your site on social, you realize, oh, I didn't even actually put that on social. So I better, because it's clearly very popular and it's getting a lot of social shares. So I need to promote that as well. So that can be really great information to see. And SumoRank also lets you see what type of content will perform well on Facebook, which can be very important. So I've also given you information about Pinterest, how to get your analytics there, and they're all available at analytics.pinterest.com. I am really bullish on Pinterest. You know, people think it's for little old ladies sharing recipes. You know, the Wall Street Journal uses Pinterest very effectively. It's a really great opportunity, and it is a huge traffic driver for a lot of sites. But you can see as well, if you see that other people in the world have pinned a particular piece of content that you yourself haven't pinned yet, okay, you need to get on that. Twitter measurement, so analytics.twitter.com. Take a look at your analytics, and you can see, I love Twitter analytics because they show you the last 90 days. Facebook, you can look at the last 28 days or the last quarter, but depending where you are in the quarter, you may not get. So for Facebook, it is important to look kind of once a month so you're getting all of the data and not missing anything. And you can export it all into Excel charts, so it's not like you've got to just kind of gaze at the screen. Likewise, you can measure Instagram. Instagram, for some insane reason, doesn't have its own analytics, which I don't understand. But then I came across Iconosquare, and I am completely addicted because Iconosquare gives all of the information about your Instagram performance and is super helpful. And it's free, so that's great. Aside from search, aside from social, you also want to look at websites and blogs that are driving traffic to your site, whether it's skiboards.com or whatever. and try to create more relationships with other blogs and sites and influencers so you can get more inbound links. And consider new platforms. I don't know if you guys have tried Medium at all. Depending on what your topic is, Medium is so cool because you can actually just put in the URL of your story on your site. It automatically populates on Medium. And you might be saying, well, why would I put my content on somebody else's site? But if people see it and they love it, and then they're actually discovering your brand for the first time, it can be a really great way to promote brand discovery. In terms of search, you want to look at your percentage of search referrals, which pages are getting the highest. You can look at search keywords through the queries report. You just have to set that up. Look at your site search data and get a sense of how are you performing in search. People think that search engine optimization is dead. It is not dead. It's still very important to make sure that you're clearly labeling your content with headlines. And you also want to look at your tablet apps and your mobile apps, all the same types of things, your number of users or your downloads going up. You may have a lot of downloads, but how many people are actually using your app month to month? How much time are they spending? And a lot of times it's a lot more time than people think. Like if you have a digital edition on Issue or another sort of tablet app, sometimes people spend as long as 55 minutes looking at that. And some people will say, oh no, there's actually nobody's looking at that. And it's like, actually no, people are looking at it for 55 minutes. It's pretty powerful. And so e-newsletters, Kim's going to be talking about great e-newsletters later, but in this presentation I've included benchmarks for your open rate and your click rate within your e-newsletters, and you should be tracking your e-newsletter data month over month as well, including the subject line. Keep a track of which subject lines tend to perform well for you. And of course, there's lots of other measurement tools available today, like Chartbeat, Hootsuite, Spike, Radian6, Parsley. There's tons of tools that give you even more insights and analytics. But I hope that the sort of basic analytics that I've outlined today give you a good starting point. And once you start looking at that data, it does give you a lot of reassurance. It also makes the whole team feel really good when you're able to share, this did really well, great work. So it's a great way to motivate the whole team to do content that is really performing on all of your platforms. So that's what I have to say, but do you guys have any questions?
So if we can get you to come up to the mic and say your question up here, thanks.
I'm just wondering if you have a good way of accounting for non-human traffic bots. Bots, basically, the non-human traffic that comes to all of our sites and can show up in analytics. Do you have a good way of kind of accounting for that? Or?
I don't have a good way of accounting for that sort of on a one-on-one site basis. And if somebody else does, by all means share. I think that probably the best bet, because the challenges of bot or false traffic is really just coming to awareness. Mm-hmm. By looking at the industry averages, you could potentially say, okay, if we know that the average amount of fake traffic is this amount generally, we could speculate that it's the same for us.
Okay.
But I don't feel that fake or bot traffic is that much of an issue for some of our smaller magazine sites. Like certainly programmatic advertising, there's, people, all of the bigger sites that are using programmatic advertising, where they're selling display ads kind of on a kind of instantaneous market. And so those have had a real problem with bot fraud. Mm-hmm. But I feel it's less of an issue for some of our smaller sites. But again, if you guys come across something that says opposite, by all means,
I personally find it's a huge issue that even on a small site, I pay really close attention to my own personal website, and I get, I don't know, I don't think it's a huge percentage, but as soon as the site's been out for a couple months, somewhat updated,
So
you'll get bot traffic.
You're looking in your referrals, and you
Yeah.
can see, like, for example, under your referrals, you'll see something like Samalt,
Yes,
or
I
you'll
see that a lot,
see,
yeah.
So that is one way to look at, if you're looking at your top referrers, and you can see that some of those top referrers are, you know,
Bought.
buttons for bops and
Yeah, I get a button one a
Samalt,
lot,
those
yeah.
types of things.
Yeah.
Those can be sort of false traffic.
So you just kind of have to maybe figure out the percent and.
Exactly. So
eliminate
that would be under your top referrers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is a good way to do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.